What's going on, everybody? My name is Miles, and we're going to be ranking the Hunger Games series now that we have Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes out in theaters this weekend. And so I'm not going to be spending a lot of time. We're just going to go ahead and get into the rankings. Coming in at number 5, I have The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. Now, this was a film that didn't need to be split into two parts. The first part was all set up, and this was all payoff. This one has always been my least favorite film in the series, and rewatching it for the first time since I've seen it in theaters, it's still my least favorite. However, I think I've grown to appreciate this movie a little bit more. There are interesting concepts in this movie. I think the action set pieces are absolutely fun to see on the big screen and were visually beautiful. But other than being payoff, this movie really didn't offer anything new, and it was just a movie that didn't really need to be split into two parts. Coming in at number 4, I have one that has kind of flip flopped for me, mostly because there is one that I have grown in appreciation for, and the other one isn't as fun as I remember it being. But coming in at number 4, I have the original Hunger Games movie. As much as I loved it when it first came out, rewatching it for the first time in 11 years, this movie has not grown on me as much as I thought it was going to. Mostly because when I first saw it, I absolutely came out loving this movie and I really appreciated the world. I love the setup. And then the games for me, I remember being the really most memorable thing about it. However, rewatching it for the first time in 11 years, this movie really hasn't grown on me, mostly because I didn't feel the threat of the games as much as I thought I was going to rewatching it. President Snow doesn't get a lot of screen time, so his presence in this movie is almost non-existent. He has some moments here and there, however, it wasn't a lot for me to really get a grasp on who this character is and why he is such a dick. However, once we get deeper into the games, it really loses a lot of its pacing and it just left me a little bit more uninterested in a lot of things. Plus, he also had the other side characters that were a little cartoony to me. And so this movie is one that hasn't really aged on me as much as I thought it was going to, but I still enjoyed it to a degree. It's just not as memorable as it first was when I first saw it. Coming in at number 3, I have The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. Before rewatching this movie was my number 4. However, rewatching it for the first time since I saw it in theaters, I still think that this is a movie that didn't need to be split into two parts, but this was all just set up for me. And I think some of the political intrigue is a little bit more interesting rewatching it for the first time in almost 10 years. There are elements about this movie that I kind of have grown in appreciation for that I didn't really appreciate the first time. There are a lot more heavy tones in this movie. It's a little bit more of a darker and somber tone, not as dark as part 2. However, there are a lot of things in this movie that I really do appreciate. I really enjoyed Philip Seymour Hoffman, and I kind of felt like Haymitch was more of a presence in this movie than he was in the first two. But coming in at number 2, it's The Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Apart from the dragging third act of this movie, I was really enjoying the first two acts of the film. I really love the setup. I love Tom Blythe as President Snow and kind of seeing how he grew to be President Dickhead, I thought was very interesting. I thought the relationship between him and Rachel Zegler absolutely worked for me personally, but it was just that third act for me that really dragged this movie down a lot. Mostly because once we leave the Hunger Games, everything that happens after that is a little less interesting. I love the games in this movie a lot more. I think this is where it kind of got a little bit more violent for me personally, and it was just that third act that lost its steam, and that's where it kind of became a YA type of movie where you had a lot of very interesting things in the first two acts. Viola Davis and Peter Dinklage are absolutely fantastic. Jason Schwartzman really steals this movie from everybody, but it was just that third act that left me very uninterested. But coming in at number 1, which is probably going to be everybody's favorite, is The Hunger Games Catching Fire. I absolutely love the setup for this movie from the first two acts leading into the games. It was just absolutely great. It really didn't dive into Katniss's PTSD as much as I would have loved to. Carried on the things that I really enjoyed and made the characters a little bit more interesting, and introducing new characters like Finnick and Joanna. Francis Lawrence came in, took away the shaky cam from the first film, and we had some absolutely fantastic action sequences that I absolutely love. And even though this isn't a movie that I go back and rewatch as much as I probably should, I still have a lot of fun with this movie whenever I pop it on. The characters are a little bit more interesting than they are in the first film, and just really everything about this movie, tone, direction, character, writing, I think was better than it was in the first film. Really did set up the tone that we were going to be seeing in part one, part two, and the ending of this movie was absolutely golden. It was the cherry on top that I absolutely loved, and it was just absolutely fantastic. Those are my rankings of the Hunger Games films. Go ahead and drop your rankings down below, and I'll catch you guys for the next video.